Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Great Decisions Masterclass. This week's foreign policy challenge is artificial intelligence and national security. We've looked at artificial intelligence each of the last several years in the Great Decisions lecture series. It is an emerging topic that very likely will be considered moving forward, given the incredible breadth of impact that AI will have on our daily lives.
There's an enormous amount of AI going into what information you're being served up. So it's affecting what your information environment is. It's having a huge role in what's advertised to you, which is related to it. So I'd say already we're starting to live in this AI world.
What exactly is artificial intelligence? Well, it's several different things. At the most basic level, it is machine learning, where we type algorithms into computers, provide data, and then the computer programs are able to identify patterns or anomalies in that data. And we're talking about significant volumes of data here, which humans or basic computer programs generally would not be able to analyze efficiently. Just think about the impact this would have on, say, the Department of the Treasury, which issues hundreds of millions of checks and makes electronic payments each and every year. Using artificial intelligence can help our government identify instances of fraud or deceit in applications for tax returns or government subsidies. For example, in 2023, the Department of Treasury was able to either prevent the loss of or recoup $652 million in fraudulent claims. However, using artificial intelligence only last year, that number skyrocketed to over $4 billion. Next is what we call neural networks, computer systems designed to imitate the neurons in the brain. Natural language processing, so that AI allows computers to understand speech, to read between the lines, and analyze complex documents. And then there are the robotics, which is combining artificial intelligence with machines that can replace humans in many walks of life. AI is a remarkable development in international affairs, and its impact on so many different aspects of government and society are only now beginning to be understood. Innovation in and of itself is nothing new. Discovery is at the heart of so many changes happening around us. Discovery can impact our health, our foreign policy, our basic habits and social life, national security, and of course, our economy. I'd like to begin there and speak a bit theoretically about the impact of innovation and discovery on economics, because professors and researchers in that field have long considered long waves to be a very important part of economic evolution. Quadratic long waves generally last anywhere from 40 to 60 years, and they comprise an economic cycle. These cycles, the upticks, the waves, if you will, are driven by innovation. Discoveries at various points in time completely change the way that we think about a product or a service and lead to innovation after innovation, driving economic growth. There are three basic philosophical views about economic cycles. One holds that innovation leads to profit, and that profit, when realized, leads to competition. In other words, if one company is able to see a profit, others will recognize that and join in. Economic competition, of course, leads to a profit squeeze. As companies are trying to beat each other out in the market, they're lowering the amount of profit they're taking home. But there is a point in which companies can no longer lower the sale price of their product. They've competed down to the cost of production. And so they have to look for other ways to find profit, and they do so by adopting labor-replacing technologies, machines that do the work of people, and the ability to avoid the high labor cost of production. That, of course, leads almost by definition to unemployment. Unemployment dries up the demand side of the economic market. There's a bust. When all the dust settles, a new innovation, and the whole cycle starts all over again. This boom and bust cycle is synonymous with a Marxist view of economics. Capitalists have a very different view. They acknowledge that discovery leads to profit and, of course, competition, but that competition leads to an incentive, not only to be able to deliver a product less expensively to market, but to find new markets, new production modes, and more innovation. And that, of course, leads to more workers, investors, and inventors, which, of course, is a thriving part of an economy. So for the capitalist, innovation doesn't lead to inevitable bust, but actually further economic upturns. And then splitting the difference is the work of Joseph Schumpeter. He argued that we can probably bridge the gap between the capitalist mindset and the Marxist when it comes to discovery and innovation. And while he did not coin the term creative destruction, that's courtesy of a German philosopher earlier, he did bring it into the mainstream of economic philosophy and discourse. And what he argued is that when something new is invented, there's a creative destruction of the old production mode and expectations of society. It creates something quite positive. And he argued that not only economies, but entire nations can fall when creativity dies. So for Schumpeter, innovation is the heart of progress and survival for the nation state. Innovation has been all around us throughout history, whether it's the printing press or the combustible engine and the automobile or television. These discoveries changed economics and entire societies. Artificial intelligence, however, is not a television, and it's not a printing press. Those are identifiable and isolatable discoveries. Artificial intelligence, unlike the others, is everywhere. We find it in almost every commodity today of any degree of significance and sophistication. And so it's almost impossible to isolate ourselves from artificial intelligence. If we think about discoveries of the past, televisions, Wi-Fi, nuclear weapons, those created waves. They changed society, they changed the trajectory of nation states and all of history. In a comparative sense, artificial intelligence is a tidal wave. I don't think we've ever seen anything like what we're going to experience in the next generation as a result of artificial intelligence. And as a society and a community of nations, we have to be ready for this tidal wave. One of the great challenges with dealing with something like artificial intelligence is how quickly it advances. There's something called Moore's Law. It's a computing power model, which argues that computer knowledge advances something like this. It's rather linear, and it doubles every handful of years. By comparison, artificial intelligence over the course of the past 3 years has advanced more like this. It's absolutely remarkable how quickly the advances are being made, not only on an annual or monthly basis, but daily in the field of AI. It drives economies, it's going to drive societies, and whether we realize it or not, 3/4 of Americans are using artificial intelligence on a daily basis. Now, artificial intelligence is no different than, say, a hammer. It can be very positive and it can be very negative. A hammer can be used to build a house, and at the same time, it can be used to cause assault on another human being. And so with AI, we have to think of it like that hammer. Recognize the good, the positive, and then regulate so that the negative will be less impacting.
Artificial intelligence is a general purpose technology. It has many uses across society. You can use it to recommend what movie to watch next on Netflix. It can be used to determine whether this mole on your skin is cancer or not. But AI also has a lot of uses in policing and military applications. And I think that's where some people are a bit concerned, especially when it interacts with people's physical safety.
Think about AI and climate change. The dual-edged sword of artificial intelligence is on display. On the one hand, the amazing computing power, analytical skills, data consumption, and analysis may actually solve climate change one day. It may provide us with solutions to this existential threat that we would never otherwise discover. On a more mundane but no doubt impacting level, just imagine if artificial intelligence could be used to track the movement and the speed of every automobile on the roads, and then tie that into the proper timing of stoplights. Today, Americans waste about 97 hours a year just sitting in traffic. And that, of course, affects not only the economics of the country, but all of those idling cars unnecessarily waiting at a stoplight are emitting CO2. And there's also the health implications of sitting stationary for so long in the automobile. But at the same time, AI requires an enormous uptick in the amount of energy that powers it, and this creates a challenge for climates. 3 of the most energy-hungry endeavors in modern society today are cryptocurrency, data centers, and artificial intelligence. And we really have to factor in the energy dimension into our assessment and calculation in dealing with something like artificial intelligence. Look at the incredible increase in energy demand moving forward. Here we are today, 2025, and look where we'll be in only 5 years' time. We're talking about an almost 10-fold increase in the amount of energy needed for artificial intelligence to function. And we're already seeing this energy demand play out. Think about New York City, Manhattan, all of the people that live there, all of the electricity that is used. AI is going to need more than 1.5 times Manhattan's energy use each and every year. Constellation Energy is now restarting the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant, and they're doing it to sell the power to Microsoft for artificial intelligence. And no doubt, Microsoft is a really big actor in the area of AI, but it's not the only one. There are a lot of other corporations that are leaning very heavily into AI, and they're all going to need their own nuclear plants or other sources of new energy because of the demands of this software and this trend. In this lecture, I'd like to look briefly at the impact of AI in 4 different areas: the economy, our political order, the military, and American foreign policy. Beginning with the economy. We know that AI and robotics pose a very real threat to many existing jobs. This is just a natural occurrence because economies evolve with or without AI and robotics, so that when societies move from agrarian to industrial to post-industrial, service, and beyond, people's jobs will no longer be available. They'll have to find something else. But the question isn't really, will AI and robotics take jobs away? That's part of the calculation. But we also look at the jobs they will create. So we look at countries and their economies in 3 different categories. Advanced economies would be Canada, Western Europe, Japan, the United States. And we see that AI has the potential of replacing 30% of all jobs in advanced economies. But it can also replace that same number. So we see a rough balance here. This does not mean there will not be turbulence, because you lose that job in a coal mine or in a factory, you can't just overnight go to tech school and learn how to be a computer programmer. There will be displacement. It will affect communities, and politicians will be keen to take advantage of that politically or to try to address it and mediate the challenges that it presents. Emerging economies, say Brazil, 25% loss in labor, only a 15% replacement. So they're on the negative side. And in the low-income countries, the LDCs of the world, a slight advantage, losing 11, but anticipated to gain around 15%. If we chart this out, advanced economies, emerging economies, low-income countries, we can see that the advanced economies have the highest to lose and the highest to gain, while the LICs are on the other end of the spectrum. And what this probably means, and it is an emerging concern among economists, is that AI will likely drive further the income inequality between the wealthiest countries and the poorest. African countries importing robots even at a time when young people don't really have great job security or opportunities. Half, by some assessment, of Africa's jobs are at risk to be replaced by either AI or robotics. Looking at one country in particular, South Africa. Now, this is by far the most advanced and sophisticated economy on the African continent. It's projected to lose about 3.25 million jobs by the end of the current decade, yet because it is so advanced, it will gain roughly 4.5 million over that same period of time for an anticipated net increase of 1.2. That's very good news for South Africa, but for other countries on the continent, the trend line is negative. When we think about the necessity of AI, what it demands from society, it's not only energy, it's also computer chips. And we do know that the computer chip supply line runs largely through Asia. I'll show you that distribution in a moment. But what's clear is that the demand for chips is going to skyrocket even more, which is highly inflationary. Here you can see the production of computer chips worldwide. It is overwhelmingly dominated by China in particular. The mainland, Taiwan, and Hong Kong make up roughly half of the world's computer chip production. Expanding outward to other countries in Asia, and we're looking at the overwhelming majority. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of all chips are manufactured in Asia. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that, having a concentrated production area, as long as those countries are willing to sell them on the global market, not create some sort of a cartel like OPEC did in the 1970s, or use those chip exports as leverage against our country. There's a lot of talk these days about dealing with immigration into the United States. Mr. Trump, now elected president of the U.S., and one of the main points of focus for his campaign and probably his presidency will be mass deportation of individuals. And given that there are between 7 and 21 million undocumented workers in the country, that's a very large segment of some areas of economic endeavor, particularly farming and agriculture. American farms rely upon undocumented workers to pick the carrots, the tomatoes, and the avocados. And so if we do deport large numbers of farm workers because of their immigration status, we need to fill those jobs. And one opportunity is AI-driven robotics. We can evolve into a highly sophisticated agricultural sector by using these new technologies. In terms of politics, well, AI is going to have an impact on democracies and national elections. In 2024 alone, beginning in January with Bangladesh and finishing in December with Ghana, 50 of the 200 countries of the world went through a national election, and that affects about 2 billion people. If AI plays a role in democracy and elections, it's going to be widespread. There are very positive AI applications for politics and democracy. We think about Pakistan, for example. Mr. Khan, former prime minister, now sitting in jail on what many people believe are politically motivated charges. He was able to communicate with the rest of his country through AI-generated speeches. This is when we create an AI profile of someone, feed into it all the data that we can find, his past behavior, his political positions, the speeches that he's made, his activities in general, and then AI can tell you what he likely would have said about the current state of affairs in his country. Or in Belarus, where candidates aren't generally allowed to run for office unless the government approves of them, a wholly new candidate was manufactured by AI, representing perhaps a significant portion of society there and their interests. So positive AI applications for elections include the more effective ability to identify swing voters, to encourage them to register and vote, determining the most important campaign issues, not only nationally, but locally and regionally, educating voters on the issues on the ballot, and hosting forums for community engagement. All of this is extremely positive. It makes us a richer democracy. It deepens the roots of our democratic tradition. Pollsters, certainly that's a group that needs help, is turning increasingly to AI in order to give us better projections of what people are thinking and what they prefer. The pollsters have had a really rough run of it for the last decade or so, missing seemingly every major election, and not by small margins. If AI can make their job more accurate, then certainly that is very positive. But the negative implications of AI for democracy have to be noted and perhaps addressed by policymakers.
Our institutions and our tools rely fundamentally on truth being something that we can know. And we might argue about it and debate about it and never agree on what it is. But fundamentally, we rely on this assumption that you can have a well-educated and knowledgeable public that can know things about the way the world works. And disinformation cuts to the very heart of that. It undermines this ability to know how the world works and to understand anything. And the reason that's so authoritarian is that it's this very small jump in the populist dictator's toolkit of you can't trust anyone, you can't know anything, the experts certainly don't know anything, the only person you can trust is me and my party. Everyone else is lying to you.
Americans consume so much information from social media. It's just stunning, the impact of X, Facebook, and all of the others. And what we know is that so many quote-unquote people on social media aren't people at all. They're robots, they're bots, they're computer programs that can make themselves sound like someone from the middle of America. The growth of worldwide botnet, these computer programs that pretend to be people on social media, is only growing over time. And while this lecture series was taped in November of 2024, too early for that year's numbers, I would imagine they're up even stronger, especially during an American national campaign year. Another negative AI implication for democracy is deep fakes. They're computer-generated images that look and sound exactly like the actual person or the candidate. They can be masters of misinformation and disinformation. We know that artificial intelligence has maliciously been used domestically, and what that normally means is that someone in the blue will try to attack someone or undermine someone's confidence in the red, and the reds are doing it to the blues. But it's not limited to domestic actions. It's also maliciously used by foreign actors. And here the strategy is quite different. They want to divide Americans. They want us to separate. The moment there is a mass shooting, the AI bots are quick to jump in with very strong positions on guns either way to entice Americans to fight with each other. But it does not end there, because dividing red from blue is not enough. They want to divide within the red and the blue parties here in the United States. So these are very negative applications of AI in democracy. For the military, I'll speak rather briefly, but that does not undermine the reality that AI will have an enormous impact on our Defense Department. We may be able to train computers to better predict which conflict will occur, where instability is likely to emerge. We can use AI for better targeting, for locating the adversary, and robotics with AI-driven can take the place of soldiers in many very dangerous circumstances. In other words, the fog of war may be lifting if AI can clearly see through it all. Foreign policy, of course, we're going to consider that today. I'll focus a bit on diplomacy, because AI has the potential of completely revolutionizing our diplomatic corps. Artificial intelligence models may better forecast outcomes for proposed settlements of conflicts and disputes. Diplomats would therefore be better equipped to engage in scenario planning for ending disputes among nations and perhaps even propose more successful resolutions of disagreements among countries. Regulating artificial intelligence is absolutely necessary. Everyone agrees to that. We're just really struggling to figure out how to do it. To date, the United States has relied upon presidential executive orders to regulate. The problem with these is that they don't go through Congress, and that means the next president can simply sign an executive order to reverse them. When AI regulation goes through Congress, it normally ends up being a voluntary compliance rule. And of course, that's a positive step, but many believe it's wholly insufficient for fully regulating this industry at this critically important early time. You see here that congressional leaders are already talking about the lame duck session. When the transition from Mr. Biden to Mr. Trump, maybe they can get together after the election is over, before the inauguration, and pass some meaningful laws. Given what a short time frame we're dealing with and how slowly Congress does operate, it's very hard to be optimistic of success. How about other countries? Are they doing a better or different job of regulating AI? Most people look to the Europeans here as the standard bearers. They passed in 2023 the EU AI Act, the world's first comprehensive law that spreads across more than 24 countries in the Union. And what it does is to treat AI differently based upon the risk that it is assigned. It looks something like this. All AI applications fall into one of 4 categories, from an unacceptable risk at the top to minimal risk at the bottom, and for each of those levels, a different regulation is adopted and applied. It's a very interesting and innovative way of dealing with AI, which doesn't stand still very long, but we always have these categories to place each AI application into. The Chinese require their algorithms nationwide to be submitted to a filing system. This allows the government to keep track of what's happening out there, but it certainly would be stifling on innovation. And the Russians have adopted an incentive-based system for algorithm development and the use of AI. The problem here is that Moscow's interests vary greatly from both the US, our allies, and of course much of the rest of the world. We really have to move beyond simple regulation. That may be the starting point, but it cannot be the ending point for dealing with AI. First of all, we need more safety researchers. These are people in computer programming and data coding whose sole task is to identify dangers that are present in AI and computer models. If we consider the world of AI developers, they number about 40,000 here in the United States, but only 1% of them are responsible for safety research, and that's wholly inadequate. So maybe the government needs to think about ways of encouraging young people to go in that direction, either for the greater social good or because they're now going to be paid more because of subsidies. A global audit system would be a welcome development. Maybe treaties among allied countries, rather than trying to loop in the whole world with all the different perspectives, just focus on those countries that we agree with. And then finally, choke points. There are certain export controls that can have an enormous and outsized impact on the development of AI. Perhaps we should work more on identifying the choke points and preventing too much technology from entering the global mainstream. However you look at it, AI is going to be a very big part of our lives moving forward, economically, socially, politically, militarily, and we're going to have to address it because if we don't deal with it, it certainly will be dealing with us. The tidal wave, the tsunami, is on the near horizon. Let's be prepared to deal with its implications and take advantage of the opportunities that it presents. As always, I thank you for attending and encourage you to stay engaged and make great decisions.